All right, let's get the latest on this by welcoming Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo, who's the director at Wise for Africa. So, Advocate, it's always a great pleasure to have you with us on the show. Welcome. So, look at these latest developments now in this matter. Both parents, they abandoning their bail bid. Look, as much as this is, I suppose, a welcome move, right? But voices have been echoing the need, the Advocate, for such offenders to not even qualify for any bail. When will this be actually legislated?
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Unfortunately, we'll have to change the constitution for that to happen. Remember, the right to bail and right to representation is entrenched in our constitution. So if we are looking for reform and an amendment of the constitution, we'll have to get a 2/3 majority of that. And maybe citizens can drive that process by demanding a referendum of some sort for those changes to happen. But in the meantime, we are bound by the constitution, and that's why individuals have got the right to apply for bail. But what is important is for the state to oppose that bail. For the longest of time, you had the National Prosecuting Authority not opposing bail in matters such as these, and it was taken for granted that people can apply for bail and then get bail, and bail being granted without any opposition. So we fought for at least the opposition of that bail, and that the prosecution must fight vociferously for opposing that bail.
Advocate, I mean, is this an easy way out for the parents, you think, especially in the specific matter involving the father who's had additional charges now that have been leveled against him since the death of the daughter, and also the mother, whom we now understand she had, in fact, Advocate, tried to open a similar case, but later had come to withdraw it. In her case, what if, in fact, she is indeed a victim of the father as well, and now finds herself charged for not reporting? What are her chances also of being acquitted, especially if they also find that she was also a victim of his abuse?
So two things. If it's a message across to all parents that when you become aware of sexual assault or sexual abuse or any other form of abuse on a child, or any other individual that you know is experiencing abuse, whether you're a doctor, or you're a nurse, or a teacher, in terms of the law, you've got an obligation to report that, right? So as a parent, you have an obligation once you see and you become aware of it, that you should report it. In this case, if the mother was aware and indeed reported it and later withdrew, her chances of being acquitted on the charge of being complicit and not reporting the child's abuse might come to zero. However, if in her defense it's established that she was also a victim of physical or emotional or economic abuse, that it becomes a mitigating factor in this charge. The charge might be withdrawn depending on the evidence that gets presented. For me, fundamentally, is that no individual, no human being, no child should be experiencing this. In fact, what we should be talking about, it should not have happened in the first place. What kinds of parents are these that put their children in harm's way? And we need, as a society, as a country, as a nation, to talk about how we prevent such from happening from the go.
And how do we do that, Advocate? Because, I mean, when we talk about this in the communal context, you'll hear people saying, obviously the community was the one that actually raised the alarm on this matter. And they were saying that, of course, citizens do have a right also to report, be it a guardian or neighbor. But, I mean, it seems like in some of these areas where drugs and substance abuse also are part and parcel of the day, with the socio-economic backgrounds of these families, also a serious concern there. How does one even get through to the parents there who are basically being subjected to inequality and endless poverty given their circumstances?
In a country that was working with all the infrastructure and the facilities that are in place, would not be in this position, right? So if we had a fully functioning social work division or unit that is present in neighborhoods, that is present in communities, would be in a position to start to claw back and deal with this cash from taking place in the first place, right? That you have, and in fact, let's talk about the many organizations that are working in this area and are working just not around, addressing gender-based violence, but also mental health, dealing with substance abuse. All those organizations must work in unison so that we are able to look at the impact that we are making. The continuation of us working in silos, you look at gender-based violence in isolation of mental health. You look at gender-based violence in isolation of unemployment and poverty and the socioeconomic environment that we find ourselves. That is the problem, because your approach and your interventions are silo in how you intervene and how you respond. So it requires a multi-interlinkage that must happen across the board, because if our societies were working, so remember we talk about people who are working on the ground. We've got CBOs that are on the ground. You've got churches that are on the ground. You've got the social workers. You've got teachers who are on the ground. You've got many people in society who should be, all of us, working to ensure that we do not have this kind of scourge in our community that puts a stench in this country.
Very concerning indeed. The advocate, I was just going to ask you about the impact, should they be granted bail, and also what, of course, the court typically weigh in terms of these factors. But I'm glad that you did actually outline some of the legal framework as to how actually bail is actually accorded to the applicants. Advocate, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, as always, for your valuable input there. That is Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo, the Wise for Africa Director on the developments on the Eldorado child abuse, rape and murder case, where both accused, who are parents, have now since abandoned their bail bid early this morning.